If I were to ask you to name an area of major UFO activity, you'd probably say the USA. Well, in this episode, we'll make you think again. One of the biggest UFO crashes in history may have taken place in Wales. Plus, we hear of a UFO sighting in the 60s above Cardiff. Could Wales be the leading UFO hotspot in the world? Remember, if it's weird, if it's paranormal, if it's supernatural, it's in the Y-Files. Anyone who knows anything about UFOs will know of the famous Roswell case, when back in 1947 a UFO allegedly crash-landed into the side of a hill in New Mexico. The military apparently recovered the craft and alien bodies, plus it's alleged a live alien. But what's not widely known is that in the UK we've had an incident that could be as important as Roswell. We find out more as we open the file of the UFO crash.
The 20th of January 1974, and there was an earthquake at 8:30 in the evening, which was 3.5 on the Richter scale, and was felt for a 60-mile radius, and there was an explosion seconds or minutes after. Firstly, the first person to arrive on the scene was a nurse and her family, because she thought it was a plane crash and that she'd go to lend assistance. And she informed the Colwyn Bay headquarters, police headquarters, and they said, yes, you go ahead and we'll inform the appropriate authorities. So they went up the mountainside, stopped just opposite the Berwyn Mountain, and at first they thought there was a fire, but then it became very apparent that there was this very large object which was a pinky orange in colour, pulsating and roughly egg-shaped, sitting on the side of the mountain. And during the time they were watching it, little white lights zigzagged up underneath this object. They thought that these were the military people, you know, with lanterns, because of course there are absolutely no lights in the area, there's no habitation. So after a bit, the girls, who were 14 and 15 years old at the time, felt a bit uneasy, and they thought, you know, let's go home, Mum, and they did. They turned the car around, and they were about to go down the road. This was the B4391, a very narrow little road that cuts right through the Berwyns. And a military or a police patrol, I'm not sure which, stopped them, and they said, you're not to go in the area because we are cordoning it off. I didn't ever get first-hand reports for the first few years, but after I'd been down to the Bala area and interviewed the main witness, you know, the nurse and her family, I then started getting first-hand reports from all over the place, particularly Wrexham, which is quite a distance from Bala. And they all said exactly the same thing, that this was what they saw, a pinky orange object sitting on the side of the mountain, and it was pulsating. And when I asked them if it was just a big bright light, they said no, it was very clearly defined. If it had crashed, if there had been a military, you know, a secret military plane that crashed with perhaps nuclear reactors and things on it and they'd leaked, then why didn't the government evacuate all these people from Llandyrnog, Llandeffro, Llanlidro? You know, they put their lives in total jeopardy. One of the first-hand witnesses whom I spoke to was Miss Catherine Wynne. And she told me that they had been up at the area of Llandyrnog to take her father to visit relatives there. And they felt the earthquake and they heard the explosion, and they went up the mountainside, and again, they were on the road that was jam-packed with people. And she said the police took so long to turn them around that she got a very good view, she, her father, and elder brother, got a very good view of this object on the mountainside. Well, with regard to the alien bodies, I have to put a big question mark, because obviously you can never really know, because the military cover up all these things so successfully. But in view of the fact that so many people did give me this report, there is a possibility, if there was a UFO on the mountainside, well, it's got to be piloted by somebody.
As I understand, initially the information was that there had been a large set of sightings in the Berwyn Mountains region in North Wales. Margaret Fry had been one of the original investigators on this, and she'd gained a lot of first-hand witness statements from people who'd been on the side of the mountain and witnessed this orange light, orange-red light, and that a lot of people in the towns nearby had actually seen a glow in the sky. There'd been an earthquake in the region, and some people had reported a loud bang which might have come from an explosion. That's where the story lay, and it had been fully sort of documented up to that point. Nothing more could be done, so we thought, with the story. Then Tony Dodd this year pulled out a witness, or the witness came to him and said that he had actually been present at what he called a UFO crash on the side of the mountain, and had been responsible for taking containers, which he then found out later on were containing alien bodies, to a place called Porton Down, which is a chemical biological research facility in Wiltshire. It houses some of the most dangerous diseases known to exist on the planet. So it's a very highly secured facility, and these bodies were taken down there and then dropped off by this gentleman. That's where his involvement ends. But I mean, to have somebody come forward as a witness and say that they've seen alien bodies in a crash of a UFO on the side of a mountain, this puts a whole new spin on the story. Up until that point, it had been a UFO. Nobody really knew what had gone on. But now we've got a whole new angle to the case, which, as you say, makes it sound like a Roswell, a British version of Roswell then. It has been speculated that there is some research going on into alien sort of bodies at Porton Down, and this has come to me from other sources as well. The only problem with this information is that it's very hard to back up and verify. I mean, plenty of people can tell you they think that Porton Down, which deals with some of the most sensitive chemical and biological issues in the UK, would be the place that deals with aliens. But, I mean, we also know that there are many facilities underground which have investigated UFOs and have an involvement. They don't seem to be brought into the limelight quite so much. So I don't know how we're going to get to the truth of this. If they have got alien bodies there at Porton Down, how are we going to press the government to find out these facts? How are we going to ask them to release files? If they've been keeping it secret for a long time, what now can we do to get the facts? The witness who's come forward, who's working for the Army, he's been given the name James Prescott. He wishes to remain anonymous at this point because of repercussions he says may happen to him because of releasing sensitive national security implication information. I'm never happy, really, with hearing from people who don't want to come forward fully and give their names and addresses, because it sort of puts them one step back from the information. A witness is only, in my estimation, a real witness when the full facts are out. And we've only got one witness to this. So how can we check back? If he's not going to give us all the details, all the full, sort of information, how are we going to find out whether or not he is really telling the truth?
It's a tantalising thought that a UFO may have crash-landed into a Welsh mountain. In excess of 30 people witnessed the events that unfolded that night. Was it a UFO, an aircraft, or even a top-secret missile? Investigators have yet to unearth the truth.
Within the space of, I would say, 5 minutes, the helicopter returned overhead. And within about a minute of that helicopter returning overhead in the opposite direction, this white light appeared again. At the same speed in the reverse direction. I thought this was very unusual, to say the least, and would have just put it down to a one-off sighting and not thought a lot about it. But for the fact that merely within the space of a week later, I heard a helicopter going over again, and when I checked in the back garden again and looked up again, I saw exactly the same thing. I saw the helicopter going over, and shortly after I could even count the space of time it would take, and sure enough, the white light sped past, and within 5 minutes, the helicopter returned and with this white light pursuing it and overtaking it.
Welcome back. We stay in Wales for our second file today. On the night of the 11th of May, 4 friends were enjoying an evening together. But it was to become a very unusual night in, as we find out as we open the file of the Welsh UFO.
Where we're at the moment is a place called Welsh Reservoir Hill, which is just on the outskirts of Cardiff. It's a nice location overlooking Cardiff. And the reason we're here today is because there's been a number of UFO sightings over Cardiff, and one of the witnesses to this UFO that passed through on a particular occasion was on one of these hills, and the UFO passed across Cardiff, travelling from west to east, and it went across this area behind us here. There were a number of people that saw this UFO when it flew over. One set of people were based in Llanrumney in Cardiff, and they were coming out of a house and they saw this UFO pass over, and they kept an eye on the skies, and about 5 minutes later a helicopter came past going in the same direction. It appeared to be following the same line as the UFO. At the same time, a scout group were actually on one of these hills here. They spotted the UFO as well going along, and similarly the helicopter a little bit later, and they came forward after a newspaper article was printed in the South Wales Echo. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. It was quite a clear night, and there were sort of stars visible, and there weren't any clouds. It was a very clear night for actually seeing something like this.
I was around at my friend's house watching some videos on a Friday night. It was about 1:45 when I decided to leave, and we turned to my house, which is just around the corner. We walked out through the door. I was the first one to leave the house. As I opened the door, something in the sky immediately caught my eye. It was a bright light, and it was over in an easterly direction towards the centre of town. We could see it travelling at quite a speed, and it was disappearing and reappearing as it made its way through the gaps in the trees.
As soon as it cleared the tree line, we could see that this was something unusual. It was kind of like a solid light, kind of that's roughly the size of a pea at arm's length, moving really smoothly, totally no noise through the sky. So immediately we all realised this is something weird.
Myself and Andrew ran over to the other side of the road to get a better view, because there's a hedge obscuring the view. As we got to the other side of the hedge, we still kept sight of the light, and it kept on moving. It was moving in a northeasterly direction.
I just thought straight away, camera, because I had a film on my camera, ran back in the house and went to get my camera, and it took me a minute to find it. Ran back outside into the street in my socks, and unfortunately I missed the UFO by then. My friends at this time had gone across the road looking for it, so by that time it then disappeared from their view behind some trees and then over the hills in the distance.
We stood there and waited to see if anything else was going to appear, see if it came back the way, and an aircraft returned from the direction in which the light had disappeared, and we could distinctly tell immediately this was something completely different. It was a regular aircraft. We could tell in the way it moved. It appeared to be at much higher altitude, and it had the standard flashing lights you see on an aircraft.
5-10 minutes later, while we're still out there, it was a clear sky, we saw an object coming by, lights coming from the other direction, and it was 2 white lights spaced apart, and as it came closer, passed kind of horizontally to us, we could see it was a helicopter, but it was making very little noise, like a very slight hum, but we could see it was clearly a helicopter. You could see the strobe light on the back, and so we thought, well, that's odd as well. So the first thing I did was phone Cardiff Police Station to ask if the helicopter was up that night, because we're quite used to having the police helicopter, but we knew it was something weird anyway, just had to look at the thing, but the second helicopter maybe not. So I phoned up Cardiff Police, and they said we haven't had the helicopter all night, but they said phone Gwent Police because they may have had theirs up, which I did, and they said no, we haven't had the helicopter up at all. And then I phoned up Cardiff Airport, which isn't too far, and I ruled it out with them that it was an aircraft we saw coming from there. The last plane that left Cardiff Airport was 12:20, and we saw the object about 1:45, so it would have been well gone by there. Plus, some people suggested it might have been bright landing lights, on an aircraft coming into land, but what we saw was going away from the airport, so whether it was going to, after it landed on the hill, I think. Well,
I've lived here for 27 years, and the moment I saw this thing, it looked completely different to anything we'd seen before. You see planes flying back and forth, and it doesn't even catch your eye. This thing caught our eye immediately. It was something odd about the speed it was moving, the height it was, and the intensity of the light. I felt intrigued when we saw this thing. It was a very distinct object, and it seemed to be moving at quite a speed. It was very different to anything I've ever seen in the sky before at night, and the light was very intense, and it seemed to be moving with a purpose in the way it was moving across the sky. It was very strange.
On seeing the UFO, we thought, well, it was so prominent in the sky, someone else is bound to have seen it. So the next day, which was a Saturday, I thought, well, the best way to find out if anyone else saw it would be through an article in the paper. And I spoke to someone at the paper, and on the Sunday, they put an article in, which they unfortunately got wrong. But the main thing was that we'd seen a UFO, and they put my phone number asking anyone else who'd seen it to phone me. So then on the Sunday, around tea time, I had a phone call from a guy in Bedwas, which is near Caerphilly, and without me mentioning any of the details, which weren't mentioned in the article, he told us exactly what we'd seen at the same time, and had even mentioned the aeroplane going over just after we'd seen it, but not the helicopter, because he wouldn't have seen that anyway. And then, a short while after again, I had a scout leader phone me, who was camped up on Rubina Hill in Cardiff, and all the scouts were asleep at that time, but 3 of the scout leaders all had seen this thing over Cardiff.
I could hear a helicopter flying very low over our household. So I walked out to the back garden to have a look, and sure enough, the helicopter had gone over, and shortly afterward, as I looked through the sky, I could see this white light chasing across the sky. I wouldn't have said the altitude was very great because of the intensity of the light and the size of it, but it overtook the helicopter and disappeared very fast in front, in the same flight path as a helicopter, only I would say as fast as a jet, if not a bit faster. But it was completely noiseless. Within the space of, I would say, 5 minutes, the helicopter returned overhead, and within about a minute of that helicopter returning overhead in the opposite direction, this white light appeared again at the same speed in the reverse direction. I thought this was very unusual, to say the least, and would have just put it down to a one-off sighting and not thought a lot about it. But for the fact that merely within the space of a week later, I heard a helicopter going over again, and when I checked in the back garden again and looked up again, I saw exactly the same thing. I saw the helicopter going over, and shortly after I could even count the space of time it would take, and sure enough, the white light sped past, and within 5 minutes, the helicopter returned with this white light pursuing it and overtaking it. The fact that everything was so quiet about this white light would indicate that there's no way would it be, in my opinion, a jet aircraft. But it was very puzzling, I think, as to which sort of a craft this could be and why it was in such close proximity with this helicopter.
This particular area has had a number of sightings connected with it. It has got a quarry, and UFOs are associated with quarries. It's got a reservoir. Sometimes UFOs are spotted with reservoirs, and there's rather a large military transmitter behind us, which is used for rather secret nuclear weapons firing, so we're told by CND. Now, so maybe there's some sort of connection with UFOs in this area for those reasons. We know that UFOs sort of do come to this particular part of South Wales because we've got a lot of sightings reports all the way from Cardiff right the way up to Brecon, and it seems to follow a line which travels up from this point. So we do have sightings in this area, yes. We've done as much as we can do for the moment to investigate these sightings. We've actually spoken to military air traffic, radar controllers in the civilian airports, and we've spoken to the witnesses in the area. We've tried to gather as much information as we can. What we do know is that there is UFO activity over the area, and it's definitely a hot spot. I mean, South Wales is having a lot of aerial activity at the moment. What these craft are, we're still waiting to find out.
After filming this piece, we've discovered that the UFO seen in Wales closely resembles one seen over Derbyshire in 1994. We're looking into the similarities, and we'll bring the full story in a later edition of the programme. Well, that's it for this edition of the programme, so until the next time, remember, if it's weird, if it's supernatural, if it's paranormal, it's in the Y-Files.